What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. I know this video I planned for this video to be up over the weekend, but just did not work out that way. So for that, I apologize. But I've already done my top 10 most surprising teams in 2021. Now we're going to get to my 10 most disappointing teams in 2021. And you see a couple of them on screen here that are going to be featured in this video. So again, just kind of recapping last season before we head into March, where I really get to push into off-season content, or even late February. I'm going to start pushing into off-season content as well as we wait for spring games to roll around. And they're not as far away as you think. Those spring games are going to sneak up on us very fast. But hey, if you guys enjoy this video and you want to see more content from me, hit the subscribe button, like the video, share this video, get it out to more people. I really do appreciate the support and things like that. So again, we're going to have another disclaimer this video too. Or I guess not really a disclaimer, just more of clarification. Nebraska, whose jersey I have here. Again, I'm the biggest Ohio State fan you'll ever meet. I wore a Cincinnati jersey in my last video because I had to buy Desmond Ridder, and then a Nebraska jersey because that's the state that I live in. So wearing the Nebraska jersey today, and they are not on this list either. I know they went 3-9 this year. Record-wise, we're one of the worst teams in college football. I get that, but I'm not necessarily fully upset with how Nebraska played this year. Yes, there were definitely things that Nebraska did not do well. Special teams is one of them. But if you look over pretty much any analytical site you're going to find, they rank in the top 50 in offensive and defensive production, sometimes even in the top 10 when you're looking at defense. So for Nebraska, yes, disappointing season, not in my top 10 for the reasons I just talked about. They played really well. They played better than the 3-9 team for sure. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into teams that are in my top 10. And the first one here is Clemson. So, Nate, if you don't have Nebraska in here, then why do you have Clemson? They still had a 10-win season, right? Well, yes, but that's also why Clemson's at number 10. They had a 10-win season with the win in the bowl game over Iowa State, who, spoiler, is also going to be on this list. But Clemson, just a team that really had so much bigger expectations coming in to this year. And yes, they had a 10-win season. But if you look at their schedule was set up for pretty much anyone could go 10 wins with that schedule, especially with how bad Clemson played for most of the year. Again, Clemson started to find their offense going forward, but I mean, it didn't help that DJ Uiagalelei was wasn't the guy this year. And it really made me upset because I do like this kid. I think he has the it factor, and I think he'll get back to playing better next season. But it was upsetting to play this bad this season. I mean, look at that stat line right there. 9 touchdowns, 10 picks. That's just not going to fly anywhere, especially at a program like Clemson. Not even 3,000 passing yards for a guy who had so many expectations coming into this year. But that wasn't it. Injury problems plagued this young, inexperienced Clemson team for the most part. Look at all these offensive and defensive injuries, just to name a few. And I could put even more names on this list, just to call a couple guys out. Justin Ross, Will Shipley, Brian Brzee, Tyler Davis, Nolan Turner, James Skalski. So many names that you can list here that contributed to Clemson not playing as well as they probably should have this season. But we'll see how Clemson can rebound next year, but they are my 10th most disappointing team in 2021. Number 9 is LSU, and they placed last in the SEC West, going 6-7 this year after a 5-5 season last year. And then 2019, they were national champions. Kind of hard to believe now, right? At least in my opinion, kind of hard to believe that LSU won the national title only 2 years ago. Or I guess it's hard to believe, I should have phrased it this way. It's hard to believe that LSU is playing like this after winning the national championship just 2 years ago, right? And yes, I got my flack for stuff on my LSU preview video, and I'll take it. Believe me, I was fine with that. But I really did feel like LSU was a 9-3 team. I just got that kind of like, yeah, they probably won't do much better than this. And then they did worse than that. So, I mean, this LSU team is a mystery. Couple reasons why this happened, though, especially this year. Last year, you could attribute it to opt-outs and injuries and just a young overall team. This year, though, there was no excuse. They had an inconsistent offense this year. Look at that drop in yards per game compared to last year. Yes, Kayshon Boutte did get injured about halfway through the season, but still, that is no excuse why that number is that low at a program like LSU. You should be doing better than that on a weekly basis. To be fair, and it's the reason why LSU is number 9, their SEC schedule was a gauntlet. Mississippi State, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. Of course, the only 2 wins they got there were Florida and they beat Mississippi State as well, but I just put wins next to the ranked teams. My apologies, but here, hold on, let me fix that. There you go. That should be a little bit better, right? So yeah, their schedule was a gauntlet. Of course, the rankings on screen are as of LSU playing them. So when they played Alabama, they were number 2 in the nation. When they played Arkansas, they were 25th, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, they had a hard schedule, but just with the talent that was on this team, there really wasn't a huge reason to go 6-7. LSU for me landed at number 9. Number 8 was Miami. Miami kind of had a little bit of the same, but there were some deeper problems with Miami. And when you go back to LSU, there was a culture problem there as well with Ed Orgeron. Miami, I don't know if there was a culture problem or what was going on, but Miami did turn things around as the season went along, thanks to Trevor Van Dyke, the quarterback that replaced De'Aaron King, who got hurt this year. And notice Miami still placed second in the ACC Coastal. That's how chaotic the ACC was this year. Miami, for as disappointing as they were, still placed second in their division. But De'Aaron King went down with an injury after that being his stat line. Of course, Trevor Van Dyke came in and played really well, and he's definitely going to be the face of Miami moving forward. But there was a tackling inconsistency. When you look at the defensive numbers all around for Miami, they're pretty good. They have some pretty good defensive numbers, but tackling was a big thing. There were a couple games this year for Miami that they just didn't tackle well at all. And I've read by some, it was some of the worst tackling they had ever seen. There just wasn't a huge consistent, and look at that stat right there, right? No player over 60 tackles on the year. In fact, their leading tackler, I believe, had 60 tackles. So, I mean, yes, that can show the depth of Miami, them going 7-5, of course, opting out of their bowl game, but also no one over 60 tackles also can show a tackling problem. They also had turnover trouble. They were -6 in turnover margin, one of the worst in the nation. Only forced 11 turnovers, gave the ball away 17 times. Miami was definitely disappointing this year as well, but there were still bigger disappointments. So Miami is here at number 8. Iowa State is at number 7. They went 7-6, of course. And you might be saying, I was really disappointed in Iowa State. How are they this low on the list? It's because I couldn't really find a whole lot of good reasoning why Iowa State was as bad as they were. Brock Purdy had a subpar season, yes. But when you look at that stat line, it's still not bad. Like, it's a solid stat line. The 19 touchdowns, 8 picks might throw some people for a loop, but had a lot more completions than incompletions, as you would hope. Had a really good completion percentage, threw for over 3,000 yards, almost 20 touchdowns. Yeah, the 8 interceptions will get you, as I just said, but I mean, like, Brock Purdy didn't play bad. It was definitely subpar and not up to people's expectations. And overall, when you just look at the stats surrounding Iowa State, offensively, defensively, even on some special teams, there just isn't a whole lot of reasoning to why Iowa State went 7-6, I found, except for this one. Their third down conversion rate was not good this year. They only converted third downs on a 38.6% rate. So they had a 0.386 conversion rate on third down. So basically that means if you give Iowa State 1,000 third downs, they're going to convert 386 of those, which is not great. They got forced into a lot of third and longs, to be fair, but kind of really the only thing I can find that justifies why Iowa State was 7-6. They couldn't pull games out towards the end. Brock Purdy did not play well in the clutch this year at all, including 2 costly mental mistakes in the Cheez-It Bowl, which are listed on screen there. So Iowa State for me landing at number 7. Number 6 is USC, similar color scheme. going to keep going here. And there was definitely a culture problem here at USC. Sorry, I had to flip a thing, the record wise. But no, for USC, yeah, there was definitely a culture problem here. And the reason why they are at number 6, they went 5-1 last year in the Pac-12. The only loss in the Pac-12 championship to Oregon. Of course, they opted out of the bowl game last year, didn't make a bowl game this year. They went 4-8, but there was definitely a culture problem and a coaching problem. Clay Helton just was not the guy. Every time we had expectations for USC, they did not perform at all. So Clay Helton is gone. And Lincoln Riley is in, right, along with some other pretty big hires on the coaching staff that Lincoln Riley's brought in. And I'll talk more about coaching hires and things like that as we get into videos later down the road. But another big thing for USC this year was this defense took quite a big step back when you look at yards allowed per game, when you look at yards allowed per play, almost a full yard more allowed per play, and team sacks. Keep in mind, they only played 6 games in 2020 and had 15 sacks. They played 12 in 2021 and had 21. So they would be on a 30 sack pace for excuse me, they would be on a 30 sack pace if they played 12 games last year, and they only got 21 this year. So that would be 9 sacks less, mind you. So again, still pretty big step back here. USC definitely going to go through a culture change with Lincoln Riley coming in. And that's why I don't have USC at high, because, again, they only fired Clay Helton 2 games into the season. Hard to do that with an interim head coach there to just flip things around right there. That was basically firing Clay Helton, USC saying, we give up on the rest of the season. Let's go get a new coach in the offseason. And they did. They got a stud in Lincoln Riley. We'll see where that goes. USC is at number 6. Number 5, Texas. Texas lands on the most disappointing list again. So they were 7-3 last year. We're actually quite a nice surprise. We were kind of thinking, okay, Texas might have something going here, and no. Sadly, no. So they were 7-3 in 2020, and then 2021, again, it just didn't work out. In fact, even losing to Kansas. Yeah. That's how bad the season was for Texas. They lost to Kansas. What attributed to that? Well, they had a fantastic run game led by Bijan Robinson, but the run game on the other side, by that I mean the run defense, wasn't able to do a whole lot about it. Just look at that jump in yards allowed per game. I mean, that's extraordinary. Yards per carry, again, there's rounding here, but almost 1.5 yards more in yards per carry. But another thing that played Texas this year was inconsistency at receiver. Yes, Xavier Worthy was fantastic this year. Look at his stats: 62 catches for 981 yards and 12 touchdowns. He was amazing, and he should still be for Texas moving forward. But who else was behind him? Like Jordan Whittington was there sometimes. You had Bijan Robinson there, who was actually the 3rd leading receiver on this team. And that was with Casey Thompson having quite a pretty good year. Of course, he's going to be at this school now in Nebraska. So very interesting here for Texas to see what happened. The run defense definitely got worse, was not able to defend the run as well as they were. And yeah, I know, I get it. New head coach coming in, it can be difficult to kind of look and gauge everything right now. But for me, Texas is sit here at number 5. The Steve Sarkisian offense wasn't even super good. Like, again, it was still pretty good considering he moved from Alabama to Texas. But yeah, we're going to see where Texas goes from here. But for now, they're at number 5. Number 4, they'll show up there. It is North Carolina. Yeah, so again, when we finally think North Carolina is going to be pretty solid, they're just kind of there, right? So 2020, they went 8-4. Definitely not as good as they probably could have played, but yeah, it was there. And then this year just collapsed for North Carolina. After that early loss to Virginia Tech, it just didn't work out for North Carolina at all. Sam Howell struggles. So Sam Howell struggles. Look at that stat line there. Now look at that stat line and tell me he struggled, right? Like that's the interesting thing with Sam Howell. He was my pick to win the Heisman in preseason, but he played decently, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Sam Howell had a good season, but did he have a good season for Sam Howell? Not necessarily. It was not a Sam Howell type season. Ran for 11 touchdowns, threw for 24. We'd probably like to see that passing touchdown number in the 30s. But it also didn't help that Sam Howell did not have an offensive line at all. Their offensive line for North Carolina allowed 49 sacks, and that was third most in the nation this year. And then to pile on top of that, struggles on the defensive end there as well. A drop in sacks, a drop, or I should say a gain, but really a drop in rushing yards allowed per game there as well. All the other numbers on defense pretty similar there, but those two stood out. They weren't able to get pressure as well with some of those pass rushers they lost to the NFL. And for North Carolina, Sam Howell is now gone. We'll go to the NFL draft. They're going to have Mac Brown's going to have to figure something out for this North Carolina team. But yeah, as of right now, not a lot expected of North Carolina coming into next year. They're the fourth most disappointing team from last year, in my opinion. Number 3 are the Florida Gators. Man, was this team a mess in 2021, right? So after almost making the college football playoff, of course, then you throw the shoe. You almost come back and beat Bama. You blow that one as well. There was obviously a change that needed to be made, and it was Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham that got kicked out first. Of course, now that Billy Napier's and the coaching staff has been flipped all sorts of ways, but it was Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham. You guys had to go. Todd Grantham, the defense was just not working out, and I don't have any defensive stats on the board, but Todd Grantham definitely in that defense. Like, Florida's defense got a little bit better this year, as I predicted it too. I didn't expect it to get much better, but I thought it would get a little better, but it wasn't good enough, right? And that's the thing that everyone's going to look at and say it just wasn't good enough. And then, of course, with Dan Mullen just not working out, you give up 42 points to Samford. Just disappointment for Florida this year. They had quarterback problems as well. Emory Jones was the primary starter through 19 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and everyone wanted Anthony Richardson to come in. And I thought at times he played better, but the stat line still does not convince you otherwise, right? 6 touchdowns, 5 picks. And now, of course, they get the Ohio State transfer, Jack Miller, who might come in and start for them. But there was also offensive inconsistency. Emory Jones was the leading rusher on this team, even though Damian Pierce in himself is a pretty good running back. And then leading receivers, who was behind Jacob Copeland. Yes, Justin Shorter had the same amount of catches, but just didn't feel as effective as Jacob Copeland. So this is a very disappointing season for Florida. We'll see if they can get things turned around next year with Billy Napier coming in, of course, the old Louisiana coach, but they are sitting here at number 3. And now for the top 2, and I'm pretty sure you guys can guess who the top 2 most disappointing teams are by now, but number 2 is the Washington Huskies. Oh man, did this team collapse early? After going 3-1, they would have won the North Division if COVID had not stopped them last year. And then coming into this year, there was a lot of expectations. They were ranked 20th in the preseason poll. I had them in my preseason poll. I thought this team was going to be really competitive. They were going to be able to compete with Oregon in that Pac-12 North. And then they lose to Montana in week 1. They score the first points of that game, and then they don't score at all after that. They lose 13-7 to Montana. Not saying that Montana is a bad team. They're a really good FCS program, but for a program like Washington, which just had so much expectations, that is a heartbreaker. That's a heartbreaking loss right there. Almost humiliating loss right there. And they had little to no offensive production. I mean, just look at this yards per game difference. 323 yards per game this year compared to over 400 last year. Rush game, not even at 100 yards per game. I will give Washington credit. Statistically, they had the best pass defense in the nation, but just offensively, nothing going. And yeah, they had the best pass defense. They had some really good corners and safeties play on that team, but lack of production from the front 7. Keep in mind, they only played 4 games last year and they got 10 sacks. That's a 40 sack pace. They didn't even get to half of that this season in 2021. And then the rush defense, just almost 200 yards a game. Inexcusable for the talent that was on this team. I know they dealt with some injuries there as well, but there was still so much talent on this team to do that. Now, Sam Huard should be coming in at quarterback this year for Washington, so we'll see how he plays, and maybe if Washington can turn some heads and start turning things around. But as of right now, Washington, very disappointing season, but I don't think this one is even close. I think it's clear and obvious that no one had a more disappointing season than the University of Indiana. And I mean, the record speaks for itself, right? 2-10 last year after going 6-2 last year, playing Ole Miss in the bowl game, giving Ohio State a run for their money, and then they don't win a game in the Big Ten and probably are the worst Power 5 team in the entire nation. I mean, Penix just did not play up to par at all, and then he got hurt. All other quarterbacks combined did not fill in that effort at all. 15 interceptions to 9 touchdowns this year for Indiana quarterbacks. Not good. They had a stuttering, disappointing offense. Team touchdowns was just nowhere close. They only had 24 touchdowns this year, and they played less games last year, and they still got more offensive touchdowns. Points per game took a massive drop, and defense was not up to par either. They were a turnover forcing machine that didn't allow anyone to get into the end zone, and those two scripts took a big flip this year. And again, I think you could argue this was one of the worst teams in Power 5. They just did not play well at all. No one on Indiana had a good season. There was no one on Indiana that really stood out to me and said, oh, okay, hey, that's a positive. I can't find anything. This team had such high expectations coming into this year, and they just did not perform. They did not perform at all, and it was really disappointing because I thought Indiana could be something great. Maybe this program was turning around, but now they have to get back on their feet next year to save Tom Allen's job. They were by far the most disappointing team of 2021. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys have as the most disappointing team in 2021. The next video that will be coming out, it will be coming out later this week. That is a promise. Is my way too early top 25, my way too early post Super Bowl top 25. Stay excited for that. But until then, please subscribe, like, share, do all that fun stuff. And hey, remember to play hard, tailgate harder. I will see all of you guys in the next one. Goodbye.